Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Those who are tuning up with Conflict and Resilience Research Institute's webinar series of 2020. And we have organized this seminar keeping in mind the impacts of this unprecedented pandemic happening all around us. So in this series, the first one is taking place today, followed by the second one tomorrow at 11 a.m. For the details, you can go to Conflict and Resilience Research Institute's website for the details. Just to set the context, COVID-19 pandemic is of course an unprecedented event that we all are forced to endure now. We were not prepared for the sacrifices in terms of death and destruction that it caused to our social, political, and economic lives so far. We never have imagined that we have to watch the grim statistics posted every day by Johns Hopkins University Center that shows the death toll rising in each passing day. We never have anticipated that we would be barred to see our parents and grandparents at old homes just because their health will be threatened by our own visitations. We never have imagined that we would suddenly become irrelevant in terms of our job skills linked to our employment. However, as Homo sapiens, we have evolved over millennia just because we could adapt to the changing circumstances through acquiring knowledge, learning lessons, applying such knowledge to confront the future conflict, and most importantly, overcome crisis through cooperation. In this regard, I suppose famous historian Professor Noah Hariri from Hebrew University aptly mentioned a number of aspects that this pandemic has forced us to learn in a piece that was published in Financial Times on March 20th of this year. It is worth mentioning, and I would like to read it now. And he opened up by saying that humankind is now facing a global crisis, perhaps the biggest crisis of our generation. The decisions people and governments take in the next few weeks will probably shape the world for years to come. They will shape not just our healthcare systems, but also our economy, politics, and culture. We must act quickly and decisively. We should also take into account the long-term consequences of our actions. When choosing between alternatives, we should ask ourselves not only how to overcome the immediate threat, but also what kind of world we will inhabit once the storm passes. Yes, the storm will pass. Humankind will survive. Most of us will still be alive, but we'll inhabit a different world. Many short-term emergency measures will become a fixture of our life in the future. That is the nature of emergencies. Many short-term emergency measures will become a permanent thing. Decisions that in normal times could take years of deliberation are passed in a matter of hours. Immature and even dangerous technologies are pressed into service because the risk of doing nothing are bigger. Entire countries serve as guinea pigs in large-scale social experiments. What happens when everybody works from home and communicates only at a distance? What happens when entire schools and universities go online? In normal times, governments, businesses, and educational boards would never agree to conduct such experiments. But these are not normal times, unquote. I hope this lays the background of today's webinar. We have joined today by two eminent scholars, and they're going to discuss on important topics. I shall moderate the webinar today, and we have requested our panelists to speak on the selected topics for about 15 minutes each. And once they complete their talks, we would open the forum for question and answers. This session is being streamed live in Facebook and YouTube channel of the CRRIC. And however, if you want to interact and send questions to the panelists directly, please do let us know, and we'll send you a web link to connect. You can also send your questions via Facebook page for the webinar as well. A CRRIC volunteer is monitoring the Facebook webpage and will facilitate questions and answer session. Today, as scheduled, we are supposed to have two scholars from Manitoba, and one of our panelists, she wanted to uh, take break because of personal reasons. So we have our first panelist today, Professor Dr. Dilantha from St. Paul's College, University of Manitoba. And let me read his short bio and introduce him to all of you. Professor Dilantha Fernando is the Dean of Studies at St. Paul's College at the University of Manitoba. Dr. Fernando is also a full professor in the Department of Plant Science, Faculty of Agriculture and Food Sciences at the same university. Dr. Fernando is a world authority on mitigating major crop diseases using genetics and environmentally friendly methods. He is trained plant disease epidemiologist as well. He has trained 33 graduate students and postdoctoral and visiting scientists, totaling over 80 in his lab during this period. He has published over 200 journal articles. Dr. Fernando is the recipient of many prestigious international, national, and local awards for his research, teaching, and services. Dr. Fernando received his PhD from Oregon State University, United States of America. Dilantha is a native of Sri Lanka and received his undergraduate and master's degree from Sri Lanka. Dilantha is married and has 3 sons. And he's going to talk on where should the focus be during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Dr. Dilantha.
Thank you, Dr. Kausar. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to all my friends around the world. Some of you might be listening to me from Sri Lanka, from the United Kingdom, the United States of America, Canada, and also I have some friends listening to me from Bangladesh and from the Emirates. So I bring greetings from Canada, and I hope all of you are safe and your families are safe. First and foremost, I just wanted to take this opportunity because this is streamed live to tell that my prayers are with all those families that have lost a loved one. These are difficult times, as Dr. Kausar explained to all of us, and it is not easy for losing a loved one for any reason. And this is unprecedented ways of losing a family member. And that I understand, and I hope my prayers and all the other prayers are with you with your family. So, as Dr. Kausa mentioned, I was asked to talk a little bit about the focus that has to be uh, in the world and in Canada in particular in mitigating this particular virus. And there are uh, ways that different organizations, scientists will approach this. And my perspective is as a scientist and as a common sense citizen. So my presentation is not the view of the University of Manitoba or St. Paul's College that I represent or the Faculty of Agricultural and Food Sciences. This is my view, my background in science, and how I have seen and approached this particular disease and how that can be mitigated. So first of all, I would like to start by mentioning something that Dr. Kausa mentioned, that I'm a trained plant disease epidemiologist. When it comes to diseases, whether it is human diseases or plant diseases or animal diseases, they are caused by similar organisms. The genus and the species are different. The causal organism is different, but the general principles and the organisms that cause disease are the same. So you can have viruses causing diseases on plants and humans and animals. You can have bacteria causing diseases on plants, animals, and humans, and also fungi causing diseases on plants, humans, and animals. So the principles are the same. And when we talk about how there is going to be a spread in a particular disease, that is where epidemiology comes into play. As an epidemiologist, we study how pathogens move around a particular local area and how it can spread internationally and to the world. So, my work at the University of Manitoba as a scientist has been predominantly making sure that diseases that are foreign to Canada does not come to Canada. How do you do that? You basically use science-based approaches. The science-based approaches are mainly to make sure that a foreign organism, whether it's a virus, a bacterium, or a fungus, does not come to the shores of Canada. And how do you do that? It's pretty easy. If you have traveled outside of your country and you come back to your country, most countries would have stringent measures to make sure that you are not bringing any foreign material, such as a banana, simple as that, an orange, or a daily sandwich, something that you might have even got on the plane that is not allowed to come to the country that you are just about to land on. What is the reason for that? It's simple. The simplicity comes because that foreign organ, that fruit or the daily sandwich or the meat that you might be bringing might contain an organism like a virus, a fungus, or a bacterium that might be new to the country that you are just stepping your foot into. And that would make it very difficult to control if that pathogen gets around, spreads around. So this is common sense science. And it is every day we practice this when we go on planes or we cross the border. We do that if you are a citizen that thinks about the country, you always will do and not bring foreign material, plants, or anything that might carry an organism. If we are that safe, especially even if you are moving from traveling from Canada to the United States or from the United States to Canada, we just have a physical border. It's so easy to understand. And with that physical border, when we still travel, you might think, how can there be differences between Canada and the United States in an orange or a banana? But I have faced, because I had forgotten that I had a banana, that banana was thrown out by the immigration officers, customs officers, just before I entered the United States, because there is a potential danger in carrying that to the United States. You can argue that bananas are available in all grocery stores in the United States. So what's the big deal? But the banana that comes from Canada might have certain microorganisms on the surface or inside that might now enter the United States that they do not have, and that might have an impact. So, if this is the way that we should be thinking about as an epidemiologist, as a common sense citizen, I think the first response that we had when the COVID-19 broke out in China was unfortunately not the right move. We did not take action, and many countries did not take action at that very beginning to make sure that your borders are not allowing the organisms to be carried to your country. Now, we understand that for any organism to be carried, there needs something like an apple, an orange, or banana that I just explained. But also, humans carry microorganisms and especially deadly diseases. So the easiest thing that countries should have done and made sure that their countries are safe is to stop the um, foreign or people coming into the country at that particular time. Now, that has been practiced in many countries today, but after the initial infections were brought into those countries, the countries that can successfully say that they have mitigated this disease took action very soon. And that's where I think one of the information that Dr. Kausa shared with us of a quote from a person really makes sense. So if we took that action initially, we would have had no issues of mass spread of this disease in many of the countries. Today, you see that in the United States, in Canada, and many countries. And then there are countries that are very much developing, or the third world countries that we call third world countries, who have done superbly for various reasons. But one of the main reasons is that they took the measures seriously and they took it with a manner that you would make sure that your citizens are safe. So Canada in particular has done so well, wonderfully on the financial side. The Canadian government has come to the aid of people who lost jobs and made sure that their lives are well taken care of. And I thank the Canadian government for that. Now, many other countries might be doing the same. I am aware of Canada. Now, there are other countries that took a different stand because they might be countries that are poor, like Sri Lanka. They don't have money to give around the way that Canada can. So they took measures very seriously, did the quarantine in any person coming in were quarantined for 14 days. And after all the tests were done and found that that person was not carrying the organ infection, they were allowed to leave. So the strategies are different. The outcomes also become different. In Canada, we now have close to 6,000 deaths, or just gone over that. In Sri Lanka, which is a little bit smaller in the population, it's 23 million. Here it's 37 million. Sri Lanka, because I was born, I am in touch with Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, there are only 9 deaths. And that can be attributed to the way that the Sri Lankan authorities handle it. The health professionals, the government, and the security forces, how they manage this disease. So these are examples I'm just bringing to give a perspective of how diseases can be managed. Again, as a scientist, as an epidemiologist, I see this in a very different way than somebody else might argue on this. Now, financially, we can always help, but that financial support may not have even been needed. The jobs could have been protected with a different measure that we would have taken initially. Now, moving forward, again, countries that have more money, like Canada, the United States, have an advantage. How to bring around the economy, how to revive the economy, and also bring about the next phase of a focus, and that is developing vaccines. And as all of you know, from our very young age, we are given vaccinations. Why? That is to protect our, when we are babies, to protect us from getting harmful diseases, whether it's a bacterium or virus, it doesn't matter. They cause severe disease on especially infants and children. So we get those vaccines at different time periods in our lives. The same is true today with the COVID-19. We really need to develop a vaccine that will be available to protect us. Why do I say that? Think for a moment what the governments are doing today in easing the situation and asking people to still do social distancing, but yet go back to work and start businesses. Are they doing it because the virus has disappeared? The short answer is no. The real situation is that the system that is in place today with social distancing, wearing a mask, all that is going to help in mitigating the spread of the disease. So, with those in mind, we can open our economies. That is how we are progressing in many countries today. But keep in mind, the virus has not disappeared. The virus is not extinct. So, which means you have to develop something to mitigate this spread. And there are many ways that you can approach, but vaccines might be just one. Simple approaches we already do: washing our hands with soap, sanitizers. So, it's different countries do different things, and they are all successful in many ways. What is most important for us to remember is that a need for vaccines is a lot of research needed to get to that point. The vaccine, if I'm right, that was developed in the most shortest or brief time was, I think, the vaccine developed for mumps, and that was 4 years. So, if we are to race through and get to a vaccine in 12 to 18 months, as some countries are mentioning, we might be shortcutting certain things. And as a scientist, I see that as not a good strategy. Scientists do not take shortcuts. They do all the due diligence in what they do. That is to protect everyone. So I hope all the due diligence is done by the companies that are trying to make vaccines. They are not trying to make a vaccine to make the money, but to protect people, protect human beings. We are all in this fight, and I'm in particular proud to be in the city of Winnipeg, Manitoba, where we have the Canadian National Microbiology Labs. The Canadian National Microbiology Labs is a world leader. I would emphasize it once again. It's a world leader in developing vaccines. They were the first to develop the vaccine for Ebola and many others, including some of the medications or the protocols for HIV/AIDS. So we have a great opportunity just in Winnipeg, Manitoba, to develop a vaccine. And I'm pretty sure the scientists working in that institute are doing their level best to come up with a vaccine in the near future. And many other research institutes around the world and private companies are all doing that. And that is a great thing. And I hope we will have a vaccine soon, but with the right protocols and approaches taken to get to a vaccine. So I'll stop there. I thank the Dr. Kausar for giving me this opportunity to bring my perspective, and I will be happy to answer any questions or answer any comments you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dilantha, and we appreciate your insights. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Helal Mouhiuddin, and he's a director with the Conflict and Resilience Research Institute. He teaches at North South University, Dhaka, Bangladesh, as a professor of anthropology. And he has some unique perspective in terms of viewing impacts of COVID-19 from both sides, because he lives in Winnipeg as well. So we'll invite him to listen to his perspective for about 10 minutes. and then the forum will be open for Q&A. Dr. Helal.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kausar, and thank you, Dr. Dilantha. Dr. Dilantha, we are especially grateful to you for giving us a very good insight about the technical aspects of the disease and disease control. We needed that. My perspective would be a little bit different, for we are dealing with some different aspects, especially social change aspects. Over the last 2 or 3 months, actually from the very beginning of this disease, we have been thinking to do some research that would help to understand the social dynamics, especially how people should respond to the problem present and in the future as well. And in that line of thought, we have developed some programs. Probably I will be discussing something about that. I was not really prepared for today's discussion. I was just invited at the very last moment because we had another panelist. She was supposed to speak at a greater length. But anyway, I think I can discuss something about the issues that we are dealing with almost every day. And in Bangladesh, the COVID-19 situation is a little bit different than developed countries. We don't have that many infections, that many deaths as well. One of the reasons, as Dr. Dilantha already mentioned, that we don't have those resources and capacities just to combat tests at random. This is why we did not really do a lot of tests. That's why we did not get a lot of infection. And the death statistics is also to some extent questionable. The reason is the same, that we don't have all those resources to mobilize and to get concrete statistics and information. But whatever is there, we see a great change in our society. Not only in Bangladesh, not only in developing countries, we are looking at the situation in other countries as well, especially in the developing countries, because no one has ever thought that US would be affected this much. It's a devastating situation. And the same thing happened in Europe, in Italy, in Germany controlled to some extent. Now Sweden, it is getting the outbreak anew, something new trend. Previously, it did not uh, enforce the lockdown policy, I mean, that seriously. They had different strategy and probably that was correct for that country. But what happened at later stage, now when we see that they wanted to cope with the problem and trying to enforce the lockdown situation at this moment, the infection rate and death rate is quite high, and to some extent it is becoming unmanageable. So the problem has been, it's a global pandemic, there is no doubt about that, and the problem is that, okay, it is changing people's mindset and people's understanding, perception as well, in many different ways. What is happening in different forms? Like now, people have started to ask a question, questioning the lifestyle, modern new liberal thinkings, that whether we are in the right path or we have been making mistakes over the last couple of decades, just to embrace or by embracing open market economy and the global consumerism. Probably that's a big problem. So how people are thinking, how people are perceiving, just we have been looking at different contents that are coming out and all the information that are evolving almost every day on newspapers, that in developing countries people have started to think that whether we need to go back to the basics, we need to go back to the rural areas, to the countryside, to the suburban areas where people are living much simpler lives than what we have been enjoying and we have been longing for over the last couple of decades, just to go to the cities and living there and making a life in as many ways as possible to make money, especially the money making intention was the big thing. Now people are thinking about the next generation, okay, whether we are really making the path for our next generation to live a sustainable living, to live a good life, and such. So now there is a tendency of reverse migration that we are seeing, that many people are thinking that probably we need to leave cities, go to countrysides, live much simpler lifestyle, and begin organic farming or depending more on organic products and organic foods. Also, uh, living more nature-friendly lifestyle. People are thinking about that very seriously. Even in developing countries, poor countries like Bangladesh, we see the changes in the mindsets of people. They are thinking about going back to the basics. That probably we don't need to be that consumer minded. We have to change our consumption pattern to some extent, whatever way we can. There are some of the observations like, okay, people are thinking why the rich people, the most advantaged people, are becoming on to this disease, becoming prey to this disease, like in the United States of America. So from our local perspective, what we see that people are thinking that, okay, like one is elevator, we use elevator too much, probably because of this congested, arrangement, and many people are moving. You can think about a skyscraper, maybe 31, 41-story building, and the elevator is moving all the day long. During that time, 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 people are moving and using this elevator. They are using their fingers on the thumbs, on the buttons all the time. And they are also leaving their breaths in this congested environment. And other people are receiving that. Probably that could be a reason. I can tell you an example of death of a person who was serving an international bank in Bangladesh. He was in the HR department. He barely had any contact with common people or other people who went for banking because he was in the HR department. He did not really deal with the consumers or clients. But his COVID-19 infection was detected very early and he died maybe in 2 or 3 days. And we are receiving almost every day, two, three, four, sometimes six, seven, eight news uh, on different news sources that, okay, people are just dying and these people are so advantaged. They are in good standing, living in society, in the rich strata, upper strata of society. These people are not supposed to die so early. On the other side, there are about 3 million people, poor people living in the slums and other, shanties in big cities, in Dhaka, in Chittagong, and we don't really see death to that level. They are living quite well, and then people are asking, okay, whether the immune system is way better for these people than the rich people and the affluent people. What is the reason? We have Rohingyas here, and until only yesterday or day before yesterday, we did not even have any record of infection among the Rohingya communities. And if you see the statistics all over the world, that okay, they are doing quite well. All the refugee people are doing very well. So this is also becoming a question. We don't have an answer though. We are looking for an answer why these people are surviving better than other affluent people who are privileged and who have better access to healthcare system, medicine, and everything. So this is one question. Other people are also thinking about our everyday technology, consumption goods use like microwave use. Okay, how many times we use a microwave in a day? Maybe 10, 15, 20 times. And if there are 5 members in a family, all the time we are pressing the buttons. Are we cleaning them? No, we are not cleaning them. Some other people are also using. When we are in universities, and other places, common places, we are using common appliances, different people, and that's how it can spread very quickly. So people are asking all these questions as well, whether technology is becoming a big problem aspect for us, this area. So this is one problem. This is about the technology aspect of social change in people's perception. People are taking technology use matters in a different way, and people are rethinking. That's a good thing, good sign, and I believe people would continue doing that, and that would really bring some benefit to our understanding, because anthropologists, sociologists, and other social scientists will go to conduct some research in that line. And the second one is radicalization. This is somewhat a different topic at the social level, cultural level, and interaction level. Uh, it's a very gray area and hidden area, actually dark area. We don't get enough information about this area. I have just written an op-ed today, and it is published on Prothumalo, the leading newspaper in Bangladesh. Today, just a couple of hours ago, maybe 6, 7, 8 hours ago. And there, I brought a lot of information from all over the world that radicalization is increasing. And the Global Terrorism Index, it was published in mid-March. It has shown that from January to mid-March, during that time, that extremism increased at a 320% rate, 320% rate than normal times. Other than that, I presented there about 6, 7 different evidences and instances that all over the world, the terrorist groups and the extremist groups, they are trying to collect their members using internet, online, because people are home at this moment. Schools are closed, universities are closed, young people are there play, and young people are wasting and spending a lot of time on internet. They are playing games and other things, and these people are establishing different chat groups where people can easily join and communicate with them. And they're also trying to use all these platforms to brainwash these people, especially the youngsters, and recruit them from different sources. And there I mentioned about mentioned experiences of two persons, those who once became attached with the terrorist networks. Later, they just came back when they realized that they were in the wrong path. They came back, but many young people and youth cannot really get back to a normal life because of the system these extremist networks and radical forces use. They are very smart people, and they know how to, evade the grip of law and security system and everything. So they are very smart in this respect. That's why it becomes very difficult for many youngsters to come back to normal life. So this is one important thing that we need to look at, I believe, at this moment, because it will be a real problem if we don't take strong measures and we don't keep a serious eye on uh, the changes, and it might become another big pandemic, social problem pandemic. Then the third one is a stigma. We have already seen that, you know, there is a stigma pandemic as well all over the world. Cynophobia is one of the biggest problems in many parts of the world. Maybe not in developing countries or poor countries, but in Europe, in North America, it has already become a big problem. The people from Chinese origin, even those who were born and brought up in uh, European countries and in the North America, they are also being attacked by other people. I have seen about 100 videos over the last couple of weeks just to when I was taking different information on different media that okay on the streets here and there people are getting, especially Chinese people and Asian people are being profiled, being racialized, being attacked, and this stigma is going on. We have to do something about that. That okay, people cannot be stigmatized, other people cannot be stigmatized, and we must stay away from all these negative forces. So there is still not a very strong movement all over the world, I would say. We need to focus on that because this is a very serious area. If we get a technical solution like medicine or vaccine, okay, that would solve the problem to some extent. But what about these social problems and social disorganization and social crisis sort of problems? We have to do something in that front as well. Because say, for an example, you got a good vaccine, but people are resisting that. No, these vaccines are only for the American people or Canadian people. We will not make them accessible to the immigrants, to the Chinese people, to other people. You see what kind of social conflict, chaos, and disorder would begin from that point. So we must be very careful about all those problems that we see in the making. And if we don't be very vigilant and very proactive right at this moment, might become another social disorganization pandemic. That's my understanding. Other than that, other social problems, other social shifts will take place for sure. One is the reverse migration. It will become another big problem because many countries are now in a kind of economic turmoil. There are many recipient countries who are importing labor power from developing countries like Middle Eastern countries, Saudi Arab, uh, Kuwait, Qatar, Emirates, United Arab Emirates, all these countries, and hundreds of thousands of, actually millions of workers from Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan work there. They send remittance, and one of the biggest part of Bangladesh's national GDP is dependent on these remittances. Foreign workers, they spend less there and send back most of the earnings, most of their earnings to these countries just to their families and countries. And that's how the economies of these countries are boosted up. Now what is happening there? They are being profiled, strongly profiled that they were the biggest problems because of Singapore. In Singapore, many Bangladeshi workers were found the source of as the source of COVID-19 virus because they were living in cramped quarters. They were sharing spaces, probably one room that is good for one person to live in. They were sharing just to make some extra money, probably 4 or 5 persons were 5 workers were sharing all those spaces. And this is how it became a big problem for them and from others as well. So now these countries are looking in a very different way to the foreign workers, not there only. In Europe and also in North America, there is a movement. And this movement is getting stronger every day, almost every day. That we need to get rid of the foreign workers. If that movement begins, it will become another global pandemic, big problem for people. What will these people do? And if they come back or if they are sent back to their countries of origin, whether these people would be able to go back to normal lifestyle and to adopt the livelihood system that is really par with their capacity and their skills and all other things. So it is going to be a very big problem for sure. And this reverse migration, we are fearing that Bangladesh will get probably at least 700,000 foreign workers very soon within the next 8 to 10 months. And we don't have a strategy what we will do because Bangladesh is already in big economic shock. Probably the country would try its best to get recovered from this shock. And during that time, other aspects. But all these aspects are very integrated aspects. There are many other problems. I don't think it is a good time for us today just to discuss about everything. And I believe my time is over. Dr. Kausar is looking at me, maybe. I don't know. So these are some of the insights that I think we need to look at. And if there are information, if our listeners and viewers want to ask us some questions or want to lend us some new insights, that would be most appreciated, I believe. because that would really help us to get a good, way to and restoration of our former life group system. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pastor, Dr. Dilantha.
Thank you very much, Dr. Helal, for your wonderful discussion. So that is kind of formally ends our formal presentation part. And now I'm very excited to introduce two of our guests here today. And both of them are from Bangladesh, and both of them actually are affiliated with James P. Grant School of Public Health with BRAC University, leading a very leading organization and institution in terms of public health. So first of all, I'm introducing Dr. Mazhar, and followed by Sudipta Das. And we can see and hear Mr. Sudipta Das, but yes, Dr. Mazhar is also alive, and we are very grateful for your participation indeed. And as they are already in this business, I would kind of request Dr. Mazhar to give us a short intro about his works, and especially in terms of organizing dialogues on this topic. And of course, we'll listen to Sudipta following Dr. Mazhar. The floor is yours, Dr. Mazhar.
Thank you, Dr. Kausar Ahmed and Hilal Mouhiuddin and Dilantha, as if I correct, if spelled correctly, and of course Sudipta Das Gupta, who is also working with me for last. I mean, we have been hosting 34 episodes, and we also have been planning to also invite Dr. Hilal Mouhiuddin one day, and and Dr. Kausar Ahmed was already one of our guests in one session. So what we call it is a dialogical engagement, that all of us has something to do with this during this COVID situation globally. And our frontliners, the doctors and medical doctors and the health workers who have been putting their best effort in the front lines. And there are some other government policymakers who are also working restlessly, and also some of the law enforcement agencies who have been involved in this whole situation of combating this COVID-19. But we as kind of academic, what is our role to what is our two pieces to offer in this situation is that we need to engage this dialogical engagement, where we can share our thoughts and understanding about the whole thing. The session that we have been doing for last 38 days was basically named as COVID-19 and social sciences, and we have been trying to see how social science as a whole address this thing, how they carry this thing, and how they understand from their personal and professional lenses. And we have shared and received and discussed so many perspectives during these sessions, and we invited guest speakers from around the discipline, like anthropology, sociology, political sciences, public administration, journalism and mass communication, women and gender studies, public health, of course. And so we had got that multidisciplinary perspective, and we have a plan to transcribe those the speeches and talks that have been offered by those distinguished panelists, and we like to share those to some of our policymakers so that they can understand a little glimpse of our mind, what we have been thinking, what the academics, and also we invited some practitioners who have been working in NGOs and other agencies during this COVID situation. So so we look forward to that. that transcription on the working paper that we're planning to make and hand it over to the policymakers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mazhar. And actually, for the greater audience, I was really inspired by his effort, and I thought of just replicating the same kind of approach here from Winnipeg. Thank you, Mazhar. So now let's hear from Mr. Sudipta Dasgupta.
Thank you, Kausar sir, for giving me this opportunity to join this session. And thank you, Professor Dr. Dilantha sir and Professor Dr. Helal Mouhiuddin sir, for your very informative discussion. I was hearing from the beginning. So, first of all, I would like to introduce myself. I have completed my honors and masters on anthropology from Shahjalal University of Science and Technology, and currently working as a research assistant at Bragg Grimsby Grant School of Public Health. In this discussion, I have a question I have two questions. So the first one for Professor Dr. Dilantha sir. So the vaccine for which the researcher working hard nowadays worldwide. So do you think the effectiveness of the vaccine will differ or will vary depending on the geographical locations? Because as we have got the information on the basis of the genome sequence of the COVID-19, it is evolving itself. So do you think that it will differ depending on the geographical locations? And the second question to Professor Dr. Helal Mouhiuddin sir, that nowadays we have got some news about the patients who are suspected as a corona affected patients or the corona positive patients. They are fleeing from the hospital before the diagnosing them properly or after they have diagnosed. So what's the reason behind that of fleeing? The patients are fleeing from the hospitals. These are the two questions. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for the questions. And as the first question was posed to me, I'll do my best to answer. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not a medical scientist, but a scientist who does genome sequencing work. So I'm fairly aware of how things can work in that situation. Now, the first thing that we need to understand is viruses or any organism, there are many variants and strains, and that can happen either with time. There can be mutations, deletions, and new strains can happen. Now, with any of these viruses, the way that they interact with human beings or animals is the effector receptor interaction. So that is dictated by when we look at a genome sequence, we will be able to understand what changes have happened. So I'm not 100% sure whether there is going to be a need for different types of vaccines to be developed in different countries for different strains. I'm not sure about that at this point. And as I said, I'm not a medical scientist to get to that. But knowing from a scientific base, these even small changes, SNP changes, a single nucleotide polymorphic changes can have a completely different strain or a completely different effect on the human being. So that could be, let's say, a strain in Italy might be more potent than a strain in Bangladesh. I'm just giving an example. So to do that, then you might need to approach and address that when you're developing any medication, whether it's a vaccine or anything else, to mitigate that disease. So I think it's a very important thing for researchers to confide to, and the receptor effector target. It's just to make it easier for the audience wherever you are there and trying to understand what is a receptor, what is a effector. I'll just give a very quick, easy example. You can have a lock that you're trying to open with a key. Now, if you have a bunch of keys in your pocket and you take it out, you might see them as almost similar. Those are all similar, but only one key will fit to that lock. That is the lock and key mechanism. And that is exactly what happens with the receptor effector kind of thing. Even if a small thing is changed, then that protein-protein interaction would not happen, and there would be a different type of thing happening. So even when developing a medication or a different process to mitigate, at least till a vaccine is found, that is the kind of approach that should be taken to make sure that that particular lock and key mechanism doesn't take place. That's how I would explain.
Dr. Dilantha, thank you very much. Before Dr. Helal jumps in to answer the question, there are, I see one question came from participant, and it is flashed on the screen. Dr. Dilantha, can you see the question that the gentleman posed? So if you kindly respond.
I will just quickly read. Okay, again, a very good question. The first part of the question, whether it jumped from an animal to humans, and whether I have knowledge on that. Now, there are many, many theories on this, and that's unfortunately, we have to wait. And as a scientist, I look at things in a scientific perspective, and I don't want to point fingers at anyone at this time, because I think the main crisis is a health crisis, and we need to first find an answer to that. Political crisis and political intervention can happen at a different time, and a better understanding of how viruses that are now in humans came about can be answered later. But having said that, many viruses that including SARS and other viruses that have impacted human beings have come from animals. And so that is a very high possibility of the transmission starting from an animal, whether it's a bat or another animal, and transmission coming to the human beings. The second part of the question, can you put that question once more back? I can. Okay. So with the vaccine development, I think mutations have to be taken into account. It all depends on what type of vaccine is developed. So, for example, if you think about vaccine development itself, there are two major types of vaccine developments for for viruses. One is reducing the effect of the virus, so that so basically the company that's developing the virus is trying to inject the same virus into you as a vaccination, but the multiplication of that viral particles will be far less, or at least 20 to 50, 30 times less than the regular virus that would cause the disease. So because of that, you are quickly in a position to develop your antibodies to the antigen and react, so that you do not have the disease, but you will become uh, uh, basically immune to the disease with the antibodies being developed in your body. The second way of virus vaccination development is to completely inactivate the virus. So basically you kill the virus and then put the particles into the vaccination. So depending on those, I think the scientists will have to look at how these mutations are taken into account and the vaccination developed. Keeping in mind, certain people are not in a position to take the first type of the vaccination that I mentioned, that is to take a real live virus into you. For example, a person who is immune compromised, like an HIV/AIDS patient, cannot take a vaccination like that. So for them, there has to be a vaccination in a different form. And those also have to be taken into account. So that could be completely killing the virus and the particles being used to get your immune system boosted. Now that can be used on a HIV/AIDS patient. But there are many other immune compromised people. I'm just giving you one example. So you have to think of all that when you are developing a vaccine. So this is one of the major reasons that I kept harping that science-based approaches should be taken, no shortcuts. If there are shortcuts, we might be happy for a short period, but then there might be a lot of other implications. So as a scientist, I caution every company, every person that is watching, that we are not trying to get to the finish line with shortcuts. We have to get to the finish line with the right based science. Thank you.
Dr. Dilantha, I just have one question, which I was trying to kind of write quickly in my notepad. So you said in your presentation that Western nations possibly, I mean, in terms of statistics, suffered the most. And you rightly mentioned Sri Lankan case. And even if we talk about Bangladesh and some of the South and Southeast Asian nations, we see quite successful rate of containment and especially the casualty in terms of death. So the question is, what do you think the Western nations, these nations did not take the issue seriously, or is it a capacity issue that these countries actually do not have all this infrastructure in place to first detect the virus and then contain it? What is your opinion on that?
Okay, thank you for that question. Now, I will be trying to be very non-political in my answer here, because I think, again, as a scientist, I'm not trying to point the finger at anyone, but I think the very topic that you asked me to talk about, you used the word focus. So what is the focus in the present and the future, right? So I think most of where the Western world went wrong is with the focus that they took. One, the focus was, we have a very strong economy, so we can help people with the right type of funds if they lose a job. And that was very well done. Canada, I applaud with the way that they did that. And many people have really been able to sustain themselves during this period. But the root of the problem was not looked at carefully. The root of the problem is the spread of the virus and how it comes in. I will give you an example. In Canada, if you go back and look at the YouTube presentations or any TV, and the message that was given by the health authorities was no need of wearing a mask. And my friends in Wuhan clearly told me, when I told, here we are being told no need of wearing a mask, keep that to the health professionals because they need a mask. They said, Professor Fernando, please believe us, we are from Wuhan and we wore the mask, and that's how we mitigated this disease so quickly. I did 3 of my sabbaticals in Wuhan. So I have lots of friends, just like I have friends in Winnipeg. And that was their message. Very consistent. Any person who was chatting with me on WeChat, that was the message that they gave. They didn't budge on that. And I followed it whenever I went to buy my grocery. At the early stages, people gave me the wrong look because I was wearing a mask when everybody else was not. But it protects you and also it protects the other. Let's say I walked into the grocery store and I already had the disease in me. That's how it spreads. If I had covered myself, I'm not spreading it out. Now, just 2 or 3 days ago, Dr. Theresa Tam tells the Canadian people that you need to wear a mask. That's great news. But that could have been done 3 months early, and a lot of changes would have happened. The other point is we did not put a mandatory quarantine. It was self-quarantine. Again, getting in as an epidemiologist, if you take 100 people coming from a plane and then going to all different places within Canada, and you think that all 100 people are going to do the self-quarantine, and just 2 people do not carry that out. They think they are healthy. They go to the grocery store, they go to the bank, they go to a park, to a school. The spread of the disease happens. So this is where I think we did not do it right in most first world countries or Western countries. And there is a reason for that. Here we really value people's freedom. But one thing that you need to remember is, if you try to think of a person's freedom and just allow that person to do anything, that freedom is going to remove the freedom of thousands of others who are going to get sick, lose their family members, and so many other things that can happen throughout. Just imagine somebody losing a dad during this COVID crisis. They might be in for a financial situation that cannot be explained for years to come with small children. So many things can happen, right? So this is where I think the word focus was not in the right place. The focus, if was in the right place, we could have done better. Even today, like if you look at Sri Lanka, everyone is tested going out or coming in at the airport with a thermometer. This was not the practice even in April in Canada. People are allowed to come in without any testing. So there are lots of things. Again, this is not pointing the finger, but I'm trying to see and show where the focus should be and could be to avoid a situation that we are in today. So, so it has huge ramifications when it comes to all the other things, economy and everything. If you nip it at the bud, then the problem is gone. But if you don't, then you have to look at all other methods to mitigate that. So that's, I think, where things went a different focus.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dilantha. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Helal to kindly answer some of the questions that Mr. Sudipto raised. And here is another question from one of the participants, Dr. Helal, if you see in the screen. And I think it's a very interesting and very pertinent question. And Dr. Dilantha, please feel free to jump in if you have comments on the same question. It's not, I'm trying to compartmentalize the questions to the participants.
I'll let Dr. Helal.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sudipto, and another person, another listener or viewer, for raising another very important question. I would try my best to answer to both questions. Both are very important questions. The first one is why the infected patients are fleeing from hospitals. Okay, that was one of my questions as well at the very beginning, and I have written an op-ed on that. That why did that happen? I don't know whether you have seen that or not. So some people were fleeing in, in India. The Tablighi Jamaat, one of the Tablighi Jamaat believer or the religious practitioner, he was infected. He was placed in isolation in a hospital, and then he broke the window. and he went off. He escaped using in a very, very strange route. The people doesn't do that. He had long garments and he made rope using his own garment, and he fled the hospital in Bangladesh as well. But when you look at the statistics, they are not really many, only a few of them. In Bangladesh, at the very beginning, something happened, and then now it stopped. Now look at the opposite scenario. I think you have already seen those photographs on social media sites, social media platforms, that many people are waiting for testing themselves whether they are corona positive or not, right? They are waiting outside hospital for 3, 4, 5, 6 days. It is very unlikely that these people would escape. They are actually looking for a place, and they need to get there. Serious people. So there are all the time some oddballs, some strange people, those who act differently. This is one aspect. Other than that, it's a stigma. It is very important. Okay, one person say he was a young person. Why he left? He came from Italy, and he moved to Bangladesh from Italy after 6, 7 years. He would be going to marry a girl, and now the main intention for him, the most important thing, is just to focus on meeting with his family members, his parents, his father, mother, because he cannot, control this instinct. It is impossible. He loves his father, his mother, and after 7 or 8 years, he cannot just take it. So, it is just making a choice. To him, it was more important to meet with his mother, to his future bride, or just to socialize, to meet with friends who he missed for the last 7, 8 years. This is a kind of cost effectiveness analysis, nothing else. So it's less costly for him just to get attached with other people, because he has only 1 or 2 months break and he will again go back to Italy, or after 2 or 3 or 4 months he will not be here. So he has time shortage and time limitations. So all these practical reasons really prompted him to take that very strange decision, strange step. And another one is stigma. Once you are identified as corona positive, we previously had those stigma for the AIDS infected people, HIV infected people, and now the same, even more intense ones went against these people. People were trying to maintain a distance from these people, that okay, they are corona positive and we can not accept them in our society, in our family. They will be staying in quarantine. So at early stage, they grow a kind of mental isolation and alienation, like okay, we are being alienated from society. Desocialization is not a good thing for people. So now come to the third point, why people are feeling so, because they don't have any trust on the health management system or health services. If we have better ones, like it will not happen in Canada, because people have strong trust on their health management system, that okay, it's not a problem at all, and what our medical system is advising us is the perfect one. We have to listen to them. In our country, they don't know whether they are being placed in an isolation or in quarantine, or they will be killed, or they will be injected something else. They don't have minimum trust in the system. At the same time, the service providers, frontline people, they are also stigmatized. They don't come to these people, make their own logics and reasons, that we don't have PPE, we don't have protective gears, we can't just go to this person without proper preparation. So this person will be left unattended, and no one wants to get, especially patients. No patients want to get unattended, remain unattended for a long time. So what is the option for these people? This is why these people prefer fleeing than staying in hospital in kind of very strange and bizarre sort of isolation, where there is no care, there is no emotional support and other things. If that person moves to his house, at least there would be his mother, father. We are very strong kinship based society. We have that in our country, and we depend mostly on familial support and emotional support. So it's very important to us. You cannot just overlook all those realities. So this is the system. We should have an integrated health management system where we take care of people's emotional needs. At the same time, we provide them that confidence that okay, you can depend, you can trust on our system. We are here for you, to serve you. when they get that, they will not feel. They will not leave these hospitals. So this is, I don't know whether you got the answer, Mr. Sudipta. The second one is extremely important to me, I believe. So countries are really responding in a way, it looks like it's not integrated. It's a very separate, it's a very disjointed. All countries have their own mechanisms. There is not a global integrated mechanism that who could prescribe. I was also thinking exactly the same thing, that okay, why? So probably who could not advise anything because of the differences of countries' economies, their social system and cultural system and whatever, and their resources, availability of resources, and how they would do planning. So countries are given their independence, their freedom of choice to take their own decisions according to their own needs. That's very understandable and rational thinking in a way. But on the other side, it is a global problem. It is not a national problem because anyone can infect anyone. We are global citizens. We live in a global village. So we move very fast nowadays. We don't just remain inside our country boundaries. I move back and forth from Canada to and from Canada, Bangladesh. There are business people who continuously keep flying for business purpose from this country to that country. So some people move even 10, 12 countries in 2 or 3 days for business reasons, business purpose. That's how we became a global village, and we need an integrated global health management system. It's better that you raised this question. I believe who would pay really a good attention to that, that we need to have at least one framework, one global framework that would take care of all differences of different countries and make an integrated effort, just taking into consideration all those differences. Whether when there are differences, there are ways to bridge these gaps and differences as well. So it's not a very difficult task. Just we need to have a global understanding. Probably that will take place. I am very optimistic that Corona would make us sit together at some point, like GATT and other, economic G7, G20, all these sort of platforms. When we sit for our business interests, now people will sit for their health interests. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That actually ends our formal Q&A session. I just wanted to have last word from Professor Dr. Dilantha today. And as his talk was titled, "What would be the focus?" So, Dr. Dilantha, if you kindly wrap up our discussion today based on your theme, that what would be the focus, and that would actually create resilience in terms of facing future pandemics.
Thank you, Dr. Kauser. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to say a few words. I just wanted to wrap up with a few thoughts while I was listening to Dr. Helal and the others who gave presentations, how important some of these frontline things are. Um, we always think of frontline. When we talk about frontline, it's the sacrifices that doctors, nurses aides, and all those who work in these hospitals and in these uh, settings where older generation of people are in nursing homes that work. But we also forget that there's another component of what we should be called frontline, and that is agriculture. So I need to say that because I'm also working in agriculture and I mitigate diseases. Now, if I don't mitigate the diseases, there will be less of a crop, and a less of a crop means higher prices of food items and also less food for the people. Especially think about these times. If we didn't have the right amount of food, nourishing food on our tables, most of us will be even in a worse situation. And as Dr. Helal mentioned, the need for organic farming and the need for less pesticides is really paramount when you think about all this. And I think governments should take a lot of interest in promoting agriculture, and promoting the science of healthcare professionals, because I think we need a lot more to be done in those two areas, because they are the front line. Agriculture doesn't seem to be front line because that's kind of in the hidden, but looking at the lineups at the grocery stores, you will agree with me how important food is. And food comes because of the hard work of the farmers and the people who work in those areas of developing the right crops and varieties. So I just wanted to mention that. But I think talking about the focus, I think, as I mentioned many times, I think the virus is not gone, and the virus can have a second phase, a second surge. So I think we have to be prepared. The preparedness comes with research, the right type of research, not to make money. You will make money, a company, but the focus should be to protect human beings. As I think Helal mentioned, it's a global, we are all so globalized that we are all one. And that comes back to, if there's any other epidemic that comes and becomes a pandemic, I think it's so important that the world leaders do it right together. And that should not be led by one country. That would be disastrous. It should be a global effort, listening to even a, a leader from a third world. If they have a smart idea and that can be implemented, that should be taken into consideration. So there should not be one single leader like what we have in the G8 and G20 and so on, because then things get dictated. This is not a time when there's a health crisis and it's global. It's not dictation that is required. It is unified approach to a common sense solution. And I will end that with that. And I thank you again for inviting me to give my ideas and a sense of where science should be.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Dr. Dilantha. So
Dr. Kausar,
now,
may I ask a small question to
yes,
Dr. Dilantha that
I was.
how, I mean, I was just wondering that how long will continue this first world, second world, and third world thing, since we are living in the in one world, and this third world thing, these are so politically constructed, and I believe that one of the problem lies with this, kind of a politically constructed, you know subjugated, colonial oriented kind of, I can add more words like, like, new liberal economic kind of a, juncture position, all these kinds of word I can use. But bottom line is, how long we'll continue using these kind of words like first world, second world, and third world. I guess this word doesn't, no longer exist in the way that was being perceived before.
Dr. Dilantha, I wanted to wrap up, but unfortunately, it cannot be wrapped up.
No, I'm
Yeah.
sorry about that. I mean,
No. I mean, it's such a important question that you ask, and I think it is the right time for people to remove. Again, it's a stigma, right? Third world, first world, Western world, developing countries. Yes, there are poorer countries, but I think labeling makes them look inferior. And here was an example, a fantastic example to the whole world, that it doesn't have to be first world, second world, third world. It is the right kind of thinking and the focus that brings solutions. And there's a very good article written by a professor from the University of Johannesburg, Stephen Friedman. I will share it with Dr. Kauser. Talks exactly at that question that you asked, whether it is the time for us to give up these terms, because it puts a stigma, it puts the wrong focus, again I should say, to make people. That's part of the reason I, just a few minutes ago, I said if we are coming together as a global entity and leaders coming together, there should be no one taking the lead. That would be disastrous. If it was if we were thinking of a world leader as a country and we gave that country's president to take the lead, that could be a disastrous situation. I don't want to name names, but that's where things are today. And this is one of the best examples of where our focuses should be in the future. Now, I'm a huge fan of sports. Um, I used to play sports, and I'm also a huge fan of movies. So we tend to have this notion that they are heroes. They are heroes. Sports personalities are heroes. Movie stars are heroes. But today, we know that that's not the people who we should be thinking of as heroes. Those people who put their lives in danger. Even a soldier, like I know in Quebec, there are several soldiers that are fallen sick because they were taking care of patients in the nursing homes. The same is true in Sri Lanka. A whole naval battalion in Sri Lanka is now sick because they put their lives in danger for the common good, for human lives to be saved. So I think the perceptions should change. The world should look at things very differently from now and make sure that these kind of pandemics will never happen the way it happened this time. So this is an education for all of us, to our children, young or old, and the education system is changing. So many things are changing. And one other little thing that I wanted to say is, I think this is the best time for these multi-billion-dollar companies to make a contribution. The contribution can come from different ways, but I, as an academic, I'll tell you one way that they can be contributing. Now, most of us are getting used to online teaching and things that are very different. It doesn't have to be online teaching 2 years from now. However, there can be live streaming that would help a rural student to get something if they have the Wi-Fi or something that might help them. They don't have to go to a university that is costly. They can. I think that's where the focus also should be in these companies. Doesn't have to be in the same business. Amazon can, they are billionaires. They have made the money from humans. Why don't they put money back for the humans to develop, and especially for the younger generation? So I see that this has to open up in a different way, and different people have to contribute, especially the billionaire companies that have made so much of money. YouTube, Microsoft, I mean, you can think of many companies like that. They have the capacity to do that and help the educational system, help the youth, help the frontline workers, and as I mentioned earlier, agriculture as well. Thank you.
Great.
Dr. Mazhar, if you want to add something at the last.
No. I mean, I'm so glad hearing Dr. Dilantha's kind of a comprehensive conclusion that we need to create that one health thing. There is no first world health or second world health, because life is important for everybody. So there is nothing called different package for health. Health is so important. It has become so vital. Where this COVID-19 has shown to the world that we were so defocused with our vital things. I mean, the education and health, it's in every country. These are two neglected areas where we have been, concentrating our efforts to all these war games, all these, I mean, kind of a, hatred and, all kinds of, greed and all these things. So this is the time that COVID-19 has given us some kind of a consensus around the world, and we have seen the other side of this neoliberal economic system. I mean, how this individualistic approach is demeaning the whole world, and how it's important that we also we also combined our effort from a local and national level, rather than always banking on global south to the global north, and these are kind of a thing that we have been practicing over the years. So all kinds of hegemony and the Western biasness and all kinds of things. So my bottom line is that let's think that we have got one world, but let's think that all of the communities have their own strength, and let's not exploit each other with this global politics. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of you to participate spontaneously and with lot of spirit. Dr. Dilantha, thank you once again on behalf of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, which is actually housed at your institution, and we are very proud to be affiliated with you, and your support and your help is duly appreciated. And all the panelists, Dr. Helal Mouhiuddin from Bangladesh, Dr. Mazhar as well from Bangladesh, and Mr. Sudipta. And I also would like to thank our participants who actually participated quite vigorously in typing out their questions. And I think what we'll do is we'll put some of the questions in our Twitter and Facebook feeds so that it remains visible to others for the foreseeable future. Once again, thank you very much. Stay safe, stay well, and please tune in with the Conflict and Resilience Research Institute's tomorrow's webinar, and that would be even more fascinating, and I can promise that today. Have a safe rest of the day. Good night.